one, I got to introduce Osita here. Osita Nwanevu. He writes for the New Republic. Has anything shocked you tonight? Or are you like, what's everything looking like for you so far?
So thanks for having me on. I'm still trying to gather my thoughts, honestly, as I'm sure a lot of people are. But the big one I have is that this is reminding me a lot of 2016. And it's not reminding me of 2016 in the sense that I already think Trump is going to win. I think it's still too early to tell. It's reminding me of 2016 in that there was a point that night where I said, even if Hillary actually wins, the fact that it was this close, the fact that it wasn't a sure thing against Donald Trump means that the way that we've been conducting politics in the Democratic Party, in this country more broadly speaking, has to change. The assumptions that we went into this election with have to change. A lot of things about the way we thought everything was going to work, all of that has been flawed. I think that there are questions we should be asking of the polling industry, frankly, after tonight. I was one of the people who said, you know what, I've talked to a lot of pollsters over the past few years, and they've told me, we figured out what we did wrong with the state polls in 2016. We've made adjustments for education, all this kind of stuff. And we're in a good place this election. I think we're going to have to go back to them again and say what happened, not just in the presidential election, but some of these Senate races. But at a deeper, more existential level, I think we're at or about to reach, I think, over 230,000 dead from the coronavirus in this country. The infections are going up, hospitalizations are going up. Obviously, a large part of the country has been economically devastated. The fact that this is that close, even given all of that, I think is a huge indictment of the way this campaign is conducted and what we were thinking going into it. That's my main thought right now. This strategy, even if Biden wins and things work out okay and Democrats win the Senate, that just the strategy of we're going to point to Trump's failures of competence in handling coronavirus. We're going to point to Joe Biden's character, and that's going to win this in a landslide for us. All of that was wrong. This is going to be a close election if Biden wins. And, I wrote a piece a couple of months ago saying that if you look at the polls, to the extent that we can trust them at all, the polls were showing us that Trump was still ahead on the economy. That was still a huge issue for a number of voters. And nothing that happened on the coronavirus actually removed him from the first position on that question. Biden did not talk a lot about economic policy over the course of this campaign. If you are looking for an explanation as to why Latino voters in Florida and other places might have been more sympathetic to Trump than you might have imagined, maybe that's the answer. Maybe you should have been talking more about healthcare and other policy issues and not just sort of assumed that Trump's bigotry would carry the day with that demographic category. I don't know. I just think that there are a lot of different things that we need to be asking ourselves about, asking the Democratic Party about after this, no matter what happens tonight. It's going to be a long couple of days, it's looking like, and we won't know what actually happens for a while. But given what we do know, I think that we can tell ourselves or start asking ourselves certain questions about the way things have been working this campaign and see if we can try to turn the page from certain deceptions.
Absolutely. You're right. Osita said it here first. Jail Nate Silver. You heard it here first, folks. He said, throw Nate Silver in jail. I don't know why he went that far, but you know what? Fuck it. I'm ready to go along with that.
Soundbite.
No, you're absolutely correct. I've had Democratic consultants on. I have Democratic consultants in my audience that I constantly talk to, and they kept telling me, not you, Austin. No, like actual people that work for the DNC and stuff.
Excuse me, I've been in the field this entire election.
Well, you're great too. You're very knowledgeable. You are the resident poll watcher, and I used to make fun of you for that. Every single time I said, why is there no positive message from the Democratic Party? Why are they not advocating for any sort of policies? Why are they not trying to get you to vote for something? And even mentioned how Republicans do a better job with this when they even say something as simple as MAGA, Make America Great Again, or build the wall for that matter. Build the wall is national security policy, and it's an economic policy because they think that immigration is, depressing wages overall. And they think that immigrants are causing terror and crime in this country. Both are false. But that's still policy. And for some reason, Democrats can't do that. They constantly just go for the referendum vote. And with Donald Trump, he is so bad that, the referendum vote should end up delivering a victory to the Democratic Party, but it shouldn't get to that. And it's deeply frustrating that this is an even close race against Donald Trump, both in 2016, but also a close race against Donald Trump now after he has killed 300,000 Americans. It's remarkable. We can sit around and talk about how stupid American voters are all day long, but ultimately, The Democrats are not doing enough to reach out to people and tell them, here's why you should vote for me. Not because the other guy is bad, but also because I will do this, 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 and this. Things that you want. Healthcare, just like you pointed out. Things that you want. Criminal justice reform.
Do you think that's partially, though, because it's easier to sell racism than it is to sell people on like the nuance of like changing healthcare? Like you have to explain it with dollars and cents when you sell that versus like, hey, we dislike these other people, buy in on that, right?
Not necessarily. You just say free healthcare. Don't you want free healthcare? You like free shit? We're going to do it. Time to not ask what you can do for your country, but it's time to ask what your country can do for you. Flip the fucking narrative. And I think that's actually a positive message, and that's one that could work. The problem is the media will attack that message because they are also, unfortunately, defenders of capital interest. And capital interest dictates that we can't have socialized medicine in this country, despite the overwhelming amount of empirical evidence that points to, yes, we could absolutely have socialized medicine in this country, and it would be pretty tight on top of that. So you can clearly still dumb it down. It's just that the media won't let you get away with it. That's why you see people like Bernie Sanders get grilled by Jake Tapper like he is the opposition, like he is an ideological ally or something like that. It's just that the media won't allow it and the DNC won't allow it. I mean, think about the 14 or what was it, 20 candidates that ran in the Democratic primaries. Half of them literally ran with a suicide bomb strapped to their goddamn chest like John Delaney, just so they could ISIS-style execute Bernie Sanders on stage. Like, it was insane. They were literally running just to be like, I'm here to stop Bernie Sanders because I hate Medicare for all. And then you ask him, like, what do you do for a living? He's like, well, I have some, I own a small insurance company to the tune of multi-million dollars that I make off of that insurance company every year. But like, hey, don't worry about that. Bernie Sanders. He did that. The Democratic Party did do that. And we need to stop that. The same concept goes for unions as well. Whatever Republicans and whatever the reactionary point of view is on any particular matter, the Democrats consistently concede to that. They capitulate every step of the way. They say, all right, you're right. Maybe unions are a little corrupt. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Unions are supposed to be the backbone of the Democratic Party. The reason why we're losing the Rust Belt is not just because the jobs left, but it's also because when the jobs left, the unions disbanded. So now you don't have a machine to churn out lifelong Democratic voters anymore in these areas. And that's why these people are like, well, reactionary politics doesn't seem so bad. I think I'm going to go vote for the guy that at least is saying, I'm going to let you say the N-word, symbolically, of course.
One other thing I was going to say about Biden winning is that if he wins, he's going to come in vulnerable enough, given the weakness of his victory, that we can go in and say everything that you've just said. Like, you didn't have the message that was going to carry you in a landslide. What do you think is going to happen in 2022 with the midterms if you don't fix this? You're going to lose a House of Congress, maybe. You're not going to be able to get anything done. And then what happens in 2024? Like, we can come in and say the Democratic Party is weak. They got on this by the skin of their teeth. And unless you create a real economic platform, unless you really start speaking to people's needs, you're going to be swept out. And maybe this was a fluke victory because of the pandemic situation. I don't know, but like we can come in and say that Biden doesn't really have a solid mandate, certainly not as solid mandate as he thought he was going to have coming in. And so if we can say that and position ourselves as the people with the ideas and the people with the real message, I think that's a powerful selling point, and people are going to have to listen to us. That's the hope, at least.
Well, I'm not as positive as you are, and you are usually even more pessimistic. You're more pessimistic than most of the people I have on the show.
I'm trying tonight, man.
I think that, self-care, Osita, this is great. Drink some water, practicing self-care. Yeah. What I do think is what the Democrats are going to do, and you've been totally, I think, correct on the Mitch McConnell stuff in the past when we talked about Mitch McConnell abandoning Donald Trump a little bit and gearing up for a potential Joe Biden victory. I do think that if they do win, if they etch out a marginal victory overall, they're going to point to the overwhelming numbers in the popular vote regardless. They're going to say, look, that's wrong. It's just the Electoral College. It's not just the Electoral College. You should be able to absolutely win some of these goddamn states, even without, even without running the numbers on the board with California and New York. It's bullshit to just say in this circumstance.
And they thought they were going to.
Well,
they thought they were going to as recently as a few hours ago.
Exactly. And that's the key that we need to remind them. People were talking about 400 votes. Genuinely like, oh yeah, it's not going to be like not going to be a complete sweep, but like we're going to have more than 400 votes, I think. Like, it's bullshit. No, you're not. That's one. But two, what I do believe Democrats are going to end up doing is say, well, look, we barely won. But what we have to do now is even be more moderate. We can't expend political capital. They're going to run Rahm Emanuel 2.0 within the Joe Biden administration. And I am genuinely fearful that they're going to not want to take any risks whatsoever. That is, if we win the Senate majority, it's starting to look like starting to look a little threatened there too. And they're going to say we can't risk losing the Senate majority. So obviously we can't push for all these comprehensive plans that we had that we were going to set in place. The public option, or even card check, or anything as simple as that. Or even I guess maybe they'll probably go for DACA. DACA is pretty easy at this point. Everything beyond that, I feel like they're just going to refuse to expend political capital on, and because of their ineptitude, they're going to get owned in the midterms immediately. People in Vegas are scared, saying that it's going to turn red. I don't think Nevada is going to go red. I mean, they could not have up the Hispanic outreach that hard. Like, if this turns into black voters in the Rust Belt, to Electric Boogaloo basically, but this time for the Biden campaign, I'm going to lose my mind. We constantly keep asking ourselves, like, why are these privileged white college grads not voting for the Democratic ticket and going third party anyway? Well, okay, this time there is no third party votes, and you're still losing. You're still losing. So maybe you should reorient your messaging, your strategy in a meaningful capacity. I don't know. I'm so insanely frustrated because every single time they keep going after rural voters, or not rural voters necessarily, but like suburban voters, 65 plus voters, more moderate voters, instead of trying to actually implement like turnout strategies that maybe Bernie Sanders wouldn't be able to do during the primaries, but Joe Biden would absolutely be able to do with the multi-billion-dollar campaign fund that he had. Like the vision that Bernie had failed to implement with his turnout strategy. The point I was trying to make is that there's voter apathy, and there's nothing that these people are doing, and they don't even make a significant effort to actually listen to the voters, young Hispanic voters specifically, that do like Medicare for all and want more progressive policies. Even older Latino voters, despite being socially conservative, are actually economically more liberal or more progressive. Ironically, we're not actually doing anything in the Democratic Party to reach out to these people and tell them, like, we're going to vote for us and we're going to do exactly what you want. And instead, we just expect them to turn out and vote because the Republican Party is racist. And yeah, the Republican Party is racist, but that's not enough for people to be like, yeah, I'm going to go out and vote. You can't keep assuming that there's this boogeyman that's not voting for you, and that boogeyman is actually an out-of-touch white college-educated guy who's voting for Jill Stein or some shit, when the real problem is 100 million people are not voting in this country, and a lot of those people are poor, and a lot of those people are marginalized, and a lot of those people are black and brown. That's my take. It really frustrates me, this mentality. Something that I try to remind all the liberals that are watching me right now is the anger that they feel towards the Republican Party, the anger that they might even feel towards what is looking like an incompetent Democratic Party. Once again, I want them to remember that next time someone on MSNBC or their parents or their college professors tells them, no, you don't understand, they're doing their best. Actually, real democracy is when you do civility. Actually, real democracy is when you do civility, which means that you can never criticize the Democratic Party. Just remember, those people are either delusional or they're operating in bad faith, because you absolutely should demand more from your representatives. The policies that we talk about here on a daily basis, like Medicare for all, like labor protections that will allow for the American working class to unionize, climate change initiatives. These are all really popular policies, even when it comes to immigration policies, like immigration policies that you would consider to be completely crazy, like a pathway to amnesty. These are broadly popular ideas that are supported by the overwhelming majority of the public. I'm talking 70 to 30%. But the Republican Party understands that 30% are voters. You understand? The 30% that opposes abortion in the evangelical base, well, those guys are going to go out and vote no matter what. So all they need to do is act like they give a shit and act like they want to abolish abortion or criminalize abortion, and those evangelicals are going to come in and vote. Democrats, on the other hand, have the majority opinion, the majority support on all the policies they claim to advocate for, and yet refuse to push for it because they're terrified of expending political capital. Because of that, they put out a wishy-washy, middle-of-the-ground, concession-prone a policy measure like the ACA even that has a lot of unfavorable parts in it when no concessions were ever necessary, if we're being honest. We need to be united on the messaging front, and we need to be less afraid to push for progressive, bold legislative change.
I will say this: no matter what happens, I will never look at politics the same. I don't think, or the Democratic Party the same.
I'm just shocked. If I do say so myself, I'm just shocked, Osita. You know, John Kasich is not a big turnout driver. I mean, this is wild. Colin Powell. Who would have thought that Colin motherfucking Powell would not be a big driver, a motivator of young Hispanic voters, for example, in Texas? It's shocking to me that the Democratic Party doesn't do their very best to do that, to bring these people out to vote in the same way that they try to win over those suburban voters.
Yeah, really, really surprising that didn't work out. I mean, I think one thing that's important to understand though is like, in a way, the strategy they'd set out to win over some moderates and win over some of those Trump voters or whatever, and like people who are like ex-Republican suburbanites, that is kind of working, but it's come at the cost of these other demographic groups like Latinos. You know, like part of what they wanted to do seems to have been accomplished in some places, but it's clearly not enough to be running away with this thing, right? And it still leaves them vulnerable to the point where we're going to have to wait on tenterhooks to see where they've actually won. But yeah, like Colin Powell was not the transformative figure that they needed to put out there if they wanted to really come away with this thing in a landslide. I think people were looking for something deeper and more meaningful. You know, I've heard people the last couple of weeks with the polls being as good as they looked saying, oh, well, you criticized Joe Biden for like being in this basement and not really saying anything, but the fact that he was a good guy. Well, obviously this is a genius campaign. He's ahead by 10 points.
Yes.
He's going to win Texas. He's going to win Georgia. And you were just all stupid for criticizing Joe Biden. Like that's clearly the campaign was not all that. Right. And you're going to need to go back and sort of retool and fundamentally reconceive what they were up to here. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know that there's that much more to say about all this. But this is even if he wins, it's kind of a flop. And it's one that I hope the left can take advantage of. I think you're right to say that we should probably expect them to clamp down and say, well, actually, the solution is being more moderate and whatever. But my hope comes from the fact that I think it's actually pretty hard to be more moderate than Joe Biden was during this campaign. And it's going to be hard, especially given the fact that he's going to come in there and he's going to be asked to deal with this coronavirus situation. That's something that's going to incline policy, you would hope, in a more progressive direction, just as a fact of the situation we're in. So, you know, I think that the left has an opportunity here with the weakness of the result to really come in and try to seize the narrative and place themselves at the center of things. Who knows if they succeed? I know the Democrats are going to fight against it, but that's certainly what we have to try to do because this result is not acceptable, even if he wins. Like the fact that it was this close and not something he ran away with as we were told to expect.
Yeah. By the way, not to be the bearer of bad news, but this is the I told you so portion of the broadcast, but Joni Ernst is now narrowly leading in Iowa. Collins is leading in Maine, and I think Collins has a pretty solid lead, and with only about half the votes counted in Maine. And Tillis is leading narrowly in North Carolina, and the Senate Republicans are now probably feeling pretty good. It does look great for the Senate Republicans, the evil dipshits over there. So, that, in my opinion, is overall worse than the offense that the Democrats commit by putting up someone like Joe Biden. Losing the Senate after all of this, even if Biden wins, I mean, that is so bad. First of all, that greatly accelerates the fascism pipeline for the Republicans. That's 4 years of an obstructionist Senate under a Biden administration with like an actual economic meltdown that is inevitable at this point. That's just, you know, gift wrap like a reincarnated corpse of Hitler and put that on the Republican ticket, and they're winning. That's it. It's like 14 words all the way after all that happens. The future does seem really bleak if Republicans seemingly continue having majority in the Senate.
with things this tight, even factoring in the act of God that seemingly should have helped Joe Biden, would Joe Biden have just gotten rolled in this election if COVID hadn't been a thing?
Yes.
That's terrifying.
I've been saying that for months. Like, it was act of God after act of God after act of God for Joe Biden to stumble his way into potentially a decent sounding victory, if you believe the pollsters. And yet, for some reason, it doesn't seem to be a massive wipeout where Dems are just wiping the whole table with blue state after blue state after blue state. And that is absolutely causing us to lose Senate races that we could have potentially won. I mean, this was a gift. This was gift wrapped to the Democrats. And they still seemingly fumbled the bag. Even if they win, they still fumbled the bag a little bit. Don't misunderstand me, everybody. I'm not saying Joe Biden lost the presidency. I'm saying Joe Biden won the presidency, but he won it in an otherwise marginal victory that should not have been marginal, or at the very least, what every professional kept saying was not going to be marginal. People, like I said, were fantasized by 400 votes. There is a huge miscommunication somewhere. Either the pollsters don't understand what the fuck's going on the ground, or the Democratic Party, no matter what, is not doing a good enough job with their outreach. This is remarkable. According to the exit poll, Trump did better in 2020 with every race and gender except white men. Changed from 2016, I'm reading to you. White men, -5. White women, +2. Black men, +4. Black women, +4. That's a really crazy one. Black women, +4 is wild. Latino men, +3. Latino women, +3.
Let's go, white men!
White men are back, baby.
Yeah, white men, we're back! Woo! It's not our fault. It's not our fault.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot that the Democratic Party needs to do about their outreach strategy, or even the policies that they advocate for, and that referendum politics and their over reliance on marginalized communities coming out and turning out to vote for them, even when they're literally responsible for poisoning them, like the Obama administration was, for not doing enough to in the Flint water crisis. Turns out that has somewhat of a problem. That has kind of an impact, especially when one side is doing everything they can to just lie and act like they care about you. The hilarious part about this, and Osita, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, isn't Donald Trump's platinum plan kind of similar to what Kamala Harris wanted to do? Like, well, isn't that kind of similar to Kamala Harris's comprehensive package for uplifting gentrified communities, offering loans to people that are uplifting, not gentrified communities, sorry, uplifting underdeveloped communities by offering entrepreneurs some loans if they were to gentrify, basically, black and brown neighborhoods?
Well, the way that they think about this genre of policy is pretty similar, even if the plans aren't exactly the same. It's you have to work through tax credits. You have to work through providing loans to entrepreneurs. If you're not somebody who wants to run a small business, if you're not running a shop, I don't know that there's that much there for you in some of these plans. Trump likes to talk about opportunity zones a lot. Here in Baltimore, I live in Baltimore, Maryland. There was a candidate who was never going to win my district in the House, but she campaigned on the idea of bringing tax credits to underprivileged communities and starting businesses there. Honestly, like, the differences are not so great from what Democrats have tried in these communities for many, many years and failed to deliver results with those kinds of policies. So, I think that, again, we're seeing in that result with the exit poll and in some of the other polling we saw before, right? Democrats basically topped out, it seems like, with a lot of African-American voters in terms of the proportion of the vote that they're getting. Turnout is a different question, but they weren't going to do better than they were doing, it seems, with African-American voters with the political approach that they've had. And now we've seen Trump, I think, again, as a consequence of how well people perceived the economy to be doing before coronavirus. I think people in the Latino community, people in the African-American community gave him credit for that. He didn't really deserve it. That was growth that was already underway under Obama. But look, like, if people see things a little bit better under Trump than they were a couple of years ago, and they're not hearing a real economic program from Democrats that's going to dramatically change things for them, of course Trump's going to get that credit if you're not competing on that ground. aggressively. And I don't think we saw Biden compete aggressively on that ground over the course of this campaign. So, you're going to need more than tax credits and loans for entrepreneurs and all of this to really make a dent here and pull some of those votes back from Trump and from the Republican Party. But who knows if Democrats actually do any of that? We'll see.
Again, there is not a better argument for exactly what the fuck we've been talking about than Florida going for Donald Trump and a $15 minimum wage by 23 points. This is probably my favorite Alex Perrine quote of all time that I am going to butcher right now. He said this, I believe, I think he said this in the 2018 midterms, where he said, after looking at all the incredibly progressive ballot measures that passed with overwhelming support in the Midwest and in the South, all around the country, where he was like, turns out it's a faceless, lifeless, incredibly progressive ballot measure. That's what really does incredibly well in the Rust Belt and all around the country. These people want progressive ideas, but Democrats are, for some weird reason, not really good at delivering that. And, well, not weird reason. Sometimes they don't even want to deliver that. Stop saying, Florida, what's wrong with you, chat? You are failing to recognize that, like, this is an understandable thing. No matter how stupid you are, you know what's best for you. It doesn't matter how dumb you might be. You still are like, okay, well, I like a $15 minimum wage. I want to have more money. I want to make more money. So, yeah, of course they're going to vote for that. People want progressive policies. It's just that Democrats either A, completely fail on delivering that in a palatable capacity where they don't look like out-of-touch elitists, or they just don't even want to deliver on it. Like, they don't even want to talk about it because they think that talking about progressive policy positions that are overwhelmingly popular opens you up to a line of attack because they want to go for the referendum vote every single time. Anyway, as we were talking about, I already promoted, but David is a brilliant writer, a columnist.
Hey.
He's the executive director of the American Prospect, and he writes a newsletter called On Sanitize, and he will be also giving us some feedback here. But here's the really bad broadcaster question I ask every single guest that comes on. What has been shocking to you tonight? How do you feel about the race overall, David?
Well, there's still an outside shot that I predicted the order of votes absolutely correctly, which, is shocking to me. It would take some inside straights, but it looks like Georgia is starting to trend the Dems' way, which I called. And, you put that together with the Midwest and Arizona and potentially North Carolina. There's some blue areas of that out. I think what shocked me, or maybe not shocked, but to a degree that I didn't realize, was the damage, the inroads that Trump was making in the Latino community. I knew that he was doing pretty well, but particularly in some of these counties in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, that was the difference between Texas potentially being, basically tied, and the 6-point victory that Trump is getting right now. Not something anyone would have had at the beginning of this, is that Trump wins, or Biden wins, because of seniors after losing Latinos and black men. I mean, that was
by worse margins than Hillary Clinton. Doing
exactly.
Worse than Hillary Clinton, as Donald Trump is doing better. Actually, funny you should say that. There were some people who predicted that. There were some people who pointed that out, but those people were laughed at because they're not working at CNN. So that's besides the point, though. So what the fuck do those people know? Of course, I'm not referring to myself. I would never say that on my own broadcast. I had to go over the numbers over and over again. Okay, well, yeah, I give up. It was me. That was me. I was the person who said that. You, chat. You guys always made fun of me. Guess what? I was right. Anyway.
The Senate right now is what's interesting, because I mean, if Biden ends up winning, but Mitch McConnell still controls the Senate, that's just a recipe for 4 years of gridlock. So what does the Senate look like? So we know that Alabama is a pickup for the Republicans. We know that Arizona and Colorado are a pickup from the Democrats. Maine It's probably not going to be decided for a while because they have ranked choice voting. But I think Sarah Gideon's probably going to win there, and that's a pickup for the Dems. So you need one other seat.
Montana, maybe.
And that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
That looks like the best bet right now is Steve Bullock in Montana. He's the governor. He's running well ahead of Biden in what's counted right now with about half the vote in. And, if he takes that, then you don't have to worry about these special elections in Georgia. If he doesn't, you could have a situation with a 49-49 Senate waiting for those 2 Georgia special elections in January, which, would then become the center of the political universe in a state where potentially Joe Biden has won. That's going to be the real question is that Montana seat.
Well, just as we said that, people are saying Bullock lost the lead, but I don't know what's going on there. But according to Politico, Bullock is losing the lead in Montana. As far as the Georgia Senate races goes, now both of them are going to runoff, right? That's really going to make things complicated.
We don't know on. Yeah,
you don't think
we don't know on the Ossoff?
Well, I guess with Ossoff,
yet.
You're right. With Ossoff, it could be a little different.
We don't quite know, but if the Biden race is likely to move in such a direction when that vote in Fulton County gets called, you assume that Ossoff is going to get a good portion of that as well, and that could push Purdue under 50. So, there's a libertarian in the race that makes it hard for either side to get 50. So that's what we'll have to see. So I don't think that's over by a long shot. This is the crazy thing, is that the Senate convenes, the new Senate, on January 3rd. The special elections in Georgia are on January 5th. So what do you do with a 49-49 Senate? And there are important things that are decided on that first day of the Senate, like who the majority leader is, right? And all of these other things. So that becomes fascinating for nerds like me. The thing is, if this is the case and the Senate is still in Mitch McConnell's hands and Joe Biden has the presidency, we did an entire issue way back last year about everything that a president can do without legislation. And it's a lot of stuff. The president can cancel student debt without new legislation. He has that authority. The president can lower the price of prescription drugs by taking patents back away from these drug companies. There are numbers of things that a president can do under their own authority without legislation. And the Biden team, if they are fortunate enough to win, but they don't get the Senate, that's what they're going to have to think about. That's what they're going to have to do to make
But do you think the Biden camp will actually do that?
If they do have a Senate majority, they will expend some political capital. They're going to have to do it.
If they assume that Mitch and Joe are going to get in a room together and come up with bipartisan progress, they're kidding themselves, and they're going to destroy the Democratic Party. They're just take your pick of who's going to be the nominee in 2024 and who's going to win. You'll get crushed in the midterms. You have to make progress. You have to make tangible progress for people here. And they have the ability to do it under current laws, through laws that have already been passed. So they got to give it a shot.
So here's the argument that I made to Osita when he said some similar things earlier before you came on. Looking at how close the most moderate candidate who has ever run for office, in my opinion, despite the fact that they keep claiming Joe Biden is the most progressive, the most centrist candidate is narrowly winning, or at least not performing as well as the projected original forecast of results were looking like, right? So I fear that if there is even a majority in the Senate, there's a Senate control for the Democrats, I fear that they are going to use that as an argument to not expend political capital and continue to compromise and focus on really idiotic measures like, balancing the budget. Big ticket Democratic ideas, like things that they actually demonstrate blind ideological loyalty to in the Democratic Party, like actual deficit hawking. I am truly fearful that this is possible. This is what their advocacy is going to be on, and that they are going to meet a horrific defeat in the midterms and then get owned into oblivion in 2024 as well.
It's actually a good Senate map in 2022. Like there are some things on the table that you can deal with. The prospect of blowing the midterms in 2022 because you refuse to make progress for people, you don't know when you're going to get the Senate back then. I feel like we have a roadmap now. If that's what happens now, Democrats could still get the Senate, but it's going to be razor thin. I mean, even if they get the Senate, they're not going to have more than 51 votes, right? And that brings Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and all the very conservative Democrats into play as the tipping point on all these things, and it probably means that the filibuster is still alive and well, which is a 60 vote threshold, and that portends getting nothing done in the Senate whatsoever. You got to go to the administrative powers that a president has, the executive authority based on already passed congressional laws.
What kind of legal rhetoric could you even apply here to justify not counting any mail-in ballots? Now, the only thing I can think of is the Brett Kavanaugh decision in Wisconsin, if you recall, where in that language, in that decision, in the language, Brett Kavanaugh did make it seem like there was an arbitrary deadline for when votes should be counted for. Not even like the postmark, but in his language when he says, flip the results of the night of, or whenever the election results are called, additional votes that are postmarked for election day that come in afterwards would flip the results of the election. Now, flipping in that circumstance is unique to use because those are still verifiable votes. And when you're making a decision on considering that absentee ballots are flipping the vote technically and not a part of the actual vote process, maybe that could be used to say, well, this decision is the reason why we're saying like absentee ballots that have not been counted yet should not be considered and should if they were to flip the results.
You're talking about legally cast votes that lawyers for the Trump campaign are going to try to invalidate for one reason or another. I've heard several things beyond like they got them in past the deadline. There's also a question of there's a thing called spoiled ballots, where if you didn't get your absentee ballot in time, you can go to the polls, or if you didn't fill out the ballot correctly, you didn't put the naked envelope in, that whole thing, you can go to the polls and fix it. And now they're challenging that you're allowed to fix it, even though you are allowed. So, I mean, there are a number of ways where they're going to try to shrink the universe of votes. I mean, we saw it in Texas, right, with Harris County, where they tried to get rid of the drive-through voting votes that were cast, 127,000 of them. Again, it's not clear whether we're going to be in a place where that can be determinative, right? I mean, it could be a 5-point race in Pennsylvania and a 5-point race in Michigan and Wisconsin, and none of this matters. So we have to wait to see what the outcome, what the margin is, although they're going to try to throw out as many votes so we don't get to see that margin. One thing I would say is that from the looks of how ballot measures are doing all across the country, particularly ones that deal with people's financial lives, the supermajority passage of a $15 minimum wage in Florida, the passage of a paid family and medical leave system in Colorado, the passage of a surtax on high-income individuals to pay for education in Arizona. Seems like the ideal Democratic candidate is just a policy divorced completely from a personality. Democrats should just not even run a presidential candidate, just run a set of policies that are populist in nature, that will have a tangible effect on people's lives, rather than what they lunge at every election, which is diminishing the character of their opponent. It's very clear that what motivates voters in these areas,
$15 minimum wage in Florida by 23 points.
And these are not deep red states. There was one moment in the election, in the debate, the last debate, where Biden made an actual full-throated endorsement of a $15 minimum wage. The highest searched term on Google that night was wages. That was the highest search term coming out of that debate. I like to quote, this is from my friend Rick Perlstein. He said, in like the 1930s and 1940s, populist Democrats used to have a slogan in Texas that said, Democrats, freedom plus groceries. Like, they would actually do things for you. and that's what they would run on. This is what we have done for you, the public. You know, we've just gotten completely away from that. And it seems like the results, particularly around these core kitchen table issues, show you that you know, the American people are crying out for things to be fixed.